evening, everyone. I'm Supreet Singh of Native. I'm the managing partner and head of human resources, digital technology, and wealth management. Hope you and your loved ones are safe and are well. Welcome to the 8th webinar collaboration between Native and Executive Access, preparing organizations for future HR. I'm joined by my co-host, Agamjeet Singh Dang, Managing Partner and Chief Operating Officer at Executive Access India. In a matter of a few weeks, the world as we know has changed drastically. Countries, organizations, and people all stumbled into survival mode and are adapting to the new realities. When faced with a crisis of this magnitude, no business has been spared, whether large or small, established or startup. At the heart of this dilemma about how organizations keep businesses running is our most valuable and critical resource, our people. While for most organizations, the focus currently is surviving the crisis, this phase will have a far-reaching impact on our work, our people, and our organizations. We are reflecting on how that future will look like. Our discussion today will be centered around understanding the future organization, and we have a diverse panel of HR luminaries. Each one of those is a thought leader from a different sector. I hand over to my co-panelist, co-host Agam to introduce the panel.
Thank you for your opening comments, Supreet, and a very warm welcome to our esteemed panel, as well as everyone in the audience today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel for the evening. First up, we have Ira Gupta, the head of HR for Microsoft India, where she has been for the last 8 odd years. In this role, she focuses on making Microsoft India an exceptional place for its employees and ensures that Microsoft India is creating a culture that attracts talent and inspires talent that is passionate about achieving its missions. Prior to Microsoft, she spent 15 plus years at GSK Consumer Healthcare in various roles across multiple functions in addition to HR. Welcome to the panel, Ira. Our second panelist for the evening is Judhajit Das, Chief Human Resource Officer for ICICI Prudential Life Insurance. Jeet has been with iPru since 2000 and has been leading the HR since 2005. He moved here from GE. He started his career in RPG, where he was exposed to multiple businesses, including manufacturing and services. He currently chairs the HR and Training Committee of CII Western Region. Welcome to the panel, Jeet. Our third panelist for the evening is Manu Wadhwa, the Chief Human Resource Officer for Sony Pictures Networks India. Manu currently leads HR at Sony Pictures. She moved here from Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages, where she headed for HR for South India and Southwest Asia. Her experience spans across various industries and countries with companies like GE and American Express in the past. Welcome to the panel, Manu. Our fourth panelist for the evening is Nirbhik Goel, the Chief Human Resource Officer for Oberoi's Group. Nirbhik leads HR at the Oberoi Group. He has served as the CHRO and a senior HR leader across various countries with organizations such as AIG, Barclays, and Hyatt Hotels. Interestingly, Nirbhik started his career with Oberoi in training, and in his own admission, life has come a full circle for him. Welcome to the panel, Nirbhik. Our last panelist for the evening is Vikram Bector, the President and Chief Group CHRO for Piramal Group, a role which he has been leading for the past 4 years. And before joining Piramal, he was the Chief Talent Officer in Cipla, Reliance Industries, and Tata Motors. He has also worked with companies like Deloitte, Satyam, and Aditya Birla Group in the past, and comes across as a business leader first and an HR leader later. Welcome to the panel, Vikram. Now, to moderate the panel today for us, we have with us Avani Davda, the former Managing Director for Godrej Nature's Basket. Avani was the first CEO of Tata Starbucks, and at 33 years of age, he was the youngest CEO in the Tata Group. She started her career in the famed Tata Administrative Services and went on to work at Indian Hotels Company, Infinity Retail, before taking up her last role as the MD for Godrej Nature's Basket. Welcome to the session, Avani, and we look forward to an engaging discussion with you and the other panelists. Now, before we start, just a couple of quick guidelines. For those who are logged in from their mobile devices, please swipe left and right to see the entire panel. Secondly, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to start sharing your questions, and we'll try and answer them towards the second half of the webinar. Now over to you, Avani, to commence the discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Agam and Supreet. It's an honor and a privilege to be the moderator. We have a distinguished panel, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. As we were starting to think about this panel, the one thing that struck me about today's environment is a lot of negativity. And given the distinguished panel are people leaders, and in every walk of life, I'm sure that they have leadership lessons to really share with us. So I'm going to start off this session with, a thought-provocative question because it's playing on everybody's mind. We sense a lot of negativity, and the spirits are really dampened everywhere that we look, whether it's our families or our co-workers. And India, for the last so many years, and everyone who's worked here for the last 15, 20 years will know that it's a growth story. Every business plan is about growth. So my question is really that for an entire workforce and leadership, which is used to so much of growth and ambition, a contracting economy is going to be a first for many of us. So how do you really see yourselves as people leaders motivating your workforce and also your own leadership team, right? The CEO, etc., who lean on you during these times. So how do you balance this? How do you change the mindset today? Any thoughts on it? And I'd request Ira to start maybe with her thoughts here.
Thank you. Appreciate it, and welcome everybody. Thank you for sparing the time to listen to us. I hope it's of some value. It's a really hard question, Avani, because just India, forget the world. India itself has so many diverse meanings to the word workforce. And I can't at all presume to say that what could work to motivate one type of group or a group that's impacted in one way would work equally for the other. But I will say that at least what I'm finding in our organization and organizations like us is that some of the fundamentals of what motivates people have remained the same. Once health, safety, security are taken care of, I think we find that there is a set of people who continue to be motivated by purpose, by mission, by culture, by bigger meaning, by adding value. What is also thought of as autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if you pivot to purpose, we are leveraging, at least in Microsoft, a lot of that to motivate our people. The fact that, so what we often remind our workforce is that because of what we do, hospitals run, schools run, first responders are able to do their work. This is why what we do is important. I think we are fortunate to be able to bring people back to purpose, to enable them to find deep meaning in what they do. So that's just one perspective.
That's great, Ira. Maybe I'll ask this question to Vikram. What are your thoughts on this?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Now, thanks again, Avani, and hello everyone once again. So I think not very different from what Ira mentioned. I think it's about pride, and we are a conglomerate having a multitude of businesses. First, you're right. The mood is one of growth, and I see four moods because we have four businesses. When you look at our pharmaceutical business, it's all upbeat. We are out there for our patients. We are producing essential commodities and drugs. So the mood there is very different. Similarly, when we look at our real estate business or the financial services business, there the mood is absolutely very different from the pharmaceutical business. So I think the first thing we've had to do is look at these subcultures and sub moods, if you will. There is no meta mood, but adapt to these moods depending on where the businesses are, which businesses priority is what, and create messages around that. To give you an example, in a pharmaceutical business, people are looking at the haves and the have-nots. Why do I have to turn up to work, risk my life, and turn up into a factory versus somebody in the corporate office working from home? So how do you address and how do you take care of those safety concerns? So what I find is it's very useful to define leadership in such contexts. So we've said what extra facilities, what extra security steps, what extra benefits can we give our employees so that they are comforted while they are on the battlefront and somebody else is working from home. a simple act of suggesting that we will do all the COVID testing for you and your family, as an example. So my response is really, you have to look at the sub moods or the different moods in different businesses and respond accordingly.
Okay. Nirbhik and Manu, both of you are in very diverse industries, right? One is entertainment and one is hospitality, which is sadly going to be hit quite a bit. So maybe Nirbhik, you could tell us as to how are you seeing, workforce motivation and going forward, thinking about growth where you have salary increases every year, and this time you're going to see a contraction. So how do you deal with this kind of a crisis in the hospitality industry?
So I think, for example, the Oberoi has a clearly defined Oberoi Dharma. And like Ira and Vikram alluded to, we are pivoting towards that. And that basically talks of ensuring that the guests and colleagues and stakeholders are taken care of, like in any other company, but it's really leaders walk the talk and lead from the front on that. So I think right from the day one, right from the very top of the leadership, the message has been consistent that, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And I think that has helped kind of people understand and move into alignment on what the purpose of this whole exercise is. And I think I just want to talk a little bit about nuts and bolts, because I think from a vision perspective, and we've discussed, but I think communication is key. And we've really stepped up, and particularly in an industry where we were never used to remote working. It's a high contact industry. The guests come into your hotel and you look after them and you provide gracious hospitality. So I think just turning that switch off, where a number of our colleagues today are working from home for the very first time, and many industries may be surprised by that, but I think we had to really enable our people to start working from home. It's not as intuitive as people possibly think it is in other industries. For example, IT industries. So I think that led to the learning curve being rather steep. And I think we found that opportunity in learning and development and ensuring that there are enough platforms. And we've not taken any of that for granted and provided that upskilling so that people can work effectively from their homes. I think another nut and bolt that I want to talk about is empathy. Simple things like, if our morning meetings were at 9 a.m., we suddenly realized that there was a clash at home with online classes for kids happening at 9 a.m. and starting there. So, we had to be empathetic to be, not just hold people accountable, doing the same thing that we were doing while we were used to being in offices, but really molding and remolding the way we work. And I think so, communication, empathy, and the last thing is obviously change. There's been a lot of change. I've given a couple of examples. But I think we've tried to talk to our people regularly that this is a changing environment. And if we were communicating 4 times in a month, we are doing it 8 times a month. And we are also ensuring that productivity norms are defined, lastly, because we found that some people have become highly unproductive and are kind of, coming up the curve. But on the other hand, we were also experiencing that people were burning out because they were trying to over-impress. So I think all these key elements, and I tried to get to the ground level in this discussion, is something that we are looking at to ensure that the motivational level stays at par across the organization.
Manu, you're from entertainment, right? And thinking about a crisis like this where everybody is homebound, what has been the impact in your specific industry, and how do you see this workforce motivation and getting away from negativity? More importantly, I think it's also about whether the mood is really switching, or is it the same within the entertainment space?
Thanks, Avani, for the question, and hi, everyone. This industry has been the torchbearer of maintaining, sustaining, and elevating the mental health of the country. I'd start with that because there is a lot of consumption of content that we have seen, which has more than doubled, irrespective of the platform, irrespective of the type of content you view. And to a great extent, we have also seen reactions across diaspora where our consumers have come back asking for more, not because of the choices, but because this is one big means in which families are coming together. With that backdrop, this industry is seeing 2 very divergent impacts. One is a sense of optimism, which has risen multifold because the consumption pattern has drastically increased. So that has entailed a level of motivation to be maintained or enhanced. because there is a lot of progressive thinking happening on experimenting with content, experimenting with the way our content is produced. So you would have seen some of the recent examples across industry where our talent has actually shot shows at home, and there are reality non-fiction elements that are taking shape at home. So that is the positive impact which the industry is seeing, because it is helping us think very laterally in this adverse situation. The not so good part is that the media and entertainment space is a large ecosystem, and this large ecosystem necessarily does not have the wherewithal to sustain itself on a day-to-day basis, because gig format is prevalent in this industry. And there, I would use motivation, to be very honest, as a sophisticated word for many of our lives. But there, it is a matter of maintaining daily livelihoods. So, our attempt there has been a lot more beyond sustenance to help a lot of our partners, workers, whose daily livelihoods have started getting impacted, to stay above water. And for us, that has been motivation, because that connect and the industry coming together is helping us keep that momentum on. Because with the rising content pressure, this is needed. You definitely need your battleground soldiers to be available and be motivated to drive the purpose of mental health and well-being of the country.
Thank you. So one is how you are really motivating workforce. I think the one area I want to touch upon for people leaders like you, who have so many years of experience and the diversity we have on this panel. G, the question for you is that in the times of crisis, a lot of companies, irrespective of sectors, are really looking at cost cutting. There's a lot of uncertainty with regard to who'll get fired, will I have a job? So you guys are the people leaders, and a lot of times you have to be the bad cop on the leadership team to carry bad news. So how are you guys preparing for this? And what is some of the tips that you can share with a lot of professionals like you are who are listening to this webinar? How do you be a bad cop? How does it affect you individually? How do you demonstrate your vulnerability? And how do you do what is right for the organization? It's a tough one, right? And I'm sure there'll be case studies written about it, but would love to hear how you're thinking about it, G.
Yeah, thanks, Avani, and great to be on the panel. And good evening, everybody. So yeah, this is a really tough situation because, and this is not the first time we faced it, because 2008-9 was a big crisis as well, and before that there was the dot-com bust, and even in 97-98. I mean, if I look at my working career over the last 24-25 years, we've had cycles where things have really been very challenging. But of course, this time it's not just the economic challenge that is arising, but also the larger challenge of how to deal with a pandemic and in a lockdown mode. So clearly, I mean, it's very difficult to predict how the economy is going to, grow from here. Is it going to, I mean, how much is going to fall, and what's going to be the impact? So clearly, managing costs, which is in your control, is something that all of us will have to do. And for a service business like ours, employee costs are a significant part of our overall costs. Despite that, however, we went ahead and did increments. We went ahead and we said that, look, I mean, we had a great year last year, so we had a full bonus here. And we said that one of the things, one of our proposition is really to be a supportive environment, give our colleagues a supportive environment and stand by them when they're out of need. So if you want to establish the principle of fairness and meritocracy, then clearly there needs to be a way of dealing with it where your frontline and your frontline managers also, we thought it would be just and fair to give them increments and make sure that they feel supported during this time. However, what this crisis demands is for leaderships to step up, and it starts from the top. So if there is cost cutting, the leadership needs to take the first hit. So one of the things we did is that at the leadership level, we all took a 50% bonus, and we've also donated 1 month of our salary to PM Cares. So it's important to also demonstrate and walk the talk. So if right now we are not in a situation where we anticipate where we need to ask people to go, and that's something that we don't want to do. And even in the past, that is something we've always tried to ensure that we don't do. But of course, one of the things we need from our people is that they need to be mobile and fungible. Now, this mobility becomes a problem in a lockdown environment. But in the past, if I were to talk about 2008-9, of course, there were pockets, functions or locations where you had surplus people, and there were locations where you didn't have enough people. So we expected employees to move across roles and functions and locations wherever necessary. The lockdown creates an added challenge, but the conscious call is, at least for the foreseeable future, we will not take any employment action. There has been, however, much more tougher differentiation where a significant number haven't got increments at the lower level also, but a large number, almost 70-80% of the population have got increments and bonus. And at the senior levels, we have, as I mentioned, at the top, at the leadership level, we took a bonus cut and we donated our salary. But also at the middle and senior levels, we haven't done increments because ultimately it's walking the talk. So my personal view on all this is that there are many other cost-saving opportunities, expense management opportunities, and employee cost should be the last area to look at before you look at anything else. And I'm very happy to share that at least that's been our guiding philosophy. We are able to execute it. And yes, and hopefully at some point in time, business will revive. And that's where you need the employee commitment, because organizations, my personal belief is that organizations that stand by employees in their hour of need, that will lead to greater employee commitment, which will also show up in higher productivity. So I think this is a test of resolve. This is a test of what your values are. This is a test of, do you really mean what you say when you want to say you stand by employees and people first? And I think you have to walk the talk, and that's as pretty simple as that.
Vikram, you said you're looking at 4 different modes, given that you're working for a conglomerate. So how are you facing the challenge of having these difficult conversations and also mentoring the HR leaders in your in the different industries that your group operates in?
I think in difficult times, there are no easy answers. So few things we've learned is communication, and leaders shouldn't be hiding. Leaders should be out there, answerable, taking the calls. It's not just about HR. While yes, we work with the business leaders. So I think we're very fortunate that way that some of the actions that Jeet alluded to also, it starts with the leadership. But more importantly, how do leaders show up, communicate, and take questions on why we are doing what we're doing? So for us, that has been a very, very important milestone. I think each of our businesses is different. For our pharmaceutical business, we met our numbers. Bonuses are being distributed, especially outside of India. In India, we are deferring it, but they've been accrued, so no problem there. Financial services and our real estate business, since the business is hit, so things have got deferred. And there will also be no increments for some of our corporate colleagues, including myself. So I think there are those, walk the talk, which, Jeet alluded to. But I think we've had to train our leaders in some case on communication. How do you show up every day, take questions? What are the FAQs? So I find very proud of HR colleagues, both within our company and outside. I think I've seen HR has really come out shining in the pandemic in every company I've spoken to, because 2 or 3 things. Nirbhik spoke about enablement. I think the way HR and IT teams have enabled work from home is something to be proud of. Similarly, how we are working on communication, handling the crisis, sharing the bad news, talking about what will happen, what are the options, can you withdraw some PF if you want to increase your take home. So there are multiple things that HR has done to take care of financial issues. So we ourselves here have talked about financial wellness, mental wellness, which was usually only relegated to employee assistance programs in the US and UK. Suddenly, if we find every company is doing that, and we are no exception, but focusing on mental wellness in these times. So I think I find that people are capable of taking it on their chin. You have to be upfront and not hide behind or couch behind some bad news and not share the truth. So we find, be authentic, tell the truth, have every conceivable answer, including some answers which you don't have. I don't know when we are going to actually release the increment is also one of the answers which we should have out there.
Great. Thank you so much. I think a lot of you have alluded to the fact about hashtag work from home, right? So I'd love, Ira, your thoughts in terms of what do you see as the opportunity and challenge of this kind of, work from home situation, given you're in the tech space? And also, do you think it's sustainable?
I think it's the question on everybody's minds, right? What is work from home? How long can we do it? Does it make sense? And I have to say that I think there are two ways of looking at this. One is to look at it as a tech company, which we are, which has been used to working from home. So at least as far as Microsoft is concerned, this isn't a massive shift for us. There is always going to be a difference between being allowed to work from home and being empowered to versus having to, right? And being forced to. Those are definitely differences. But for us, our employee base is used to remote working and virtual working to a greater extent than some others. But I do want to say that overall, what we are seeing across the world, across so many governments, industries, customers, partners that we work with, is that this whole COVID crisis has certainly accelerated digital transformation across economies across the world. India is no exception. And we are almost being forced to pressure test in different industries new ways of working. Let's try this, what will happen? And I think it's also challenged us, it's also enabled us to challenge old dogmas, where many people felt you had to be in the office from this time to this time for me to know that you were being productive. The only risk that, at least at Microsoft, and Satya said this as well, that we see is we don't want to replace that old dogma with a new dogma. Now everybody needs to work from home. Now these type of people can only work from home. That's just one dogma being replaced by another. And that is something that we are certainly being very careful about going so far, because we don't necessarily believe that humans will stop being socially connected humans, right? We crave networks, we crave emotional connect, we crave community. And currently, I almost feel that organizations like us are trading on that emotional connect that we already have built.
True.
But that bank balance is going to drop. Yeah, and so we do have to think about how we are going to rebuild that emotional bank balance, how we are going to rebuild the sense of community. And so to answer your question, I'm hoping that where this will go is a mixture and an amalgamation of old and new, where almost the stigmas associated with working from home are eroded, but there is certainly the ability to come into shared spaces to fuel innovation, creativity, community, collaboration, and all of that. So that is I think, our aspiration.
Manu, I like to ask you, what do you think that given this work from home, one is of course sustainability, but do you think it will have a deeper impact on diversity, inclusion across organizations? Is that an opportunity there?
I say yes. To give a perspective on both diversity and inclusion fundamentals, one part which I do not think should change, and I hope it is not drifted for many of us, is our focus on continuing to have diverse platforms and diverse thinking being brought either by development or by infusing fresh talent. So in my mind, I think there is absolute need and necessity for us to continue to focus on that lens. In my mind, I think the other piece which will eliminate or reduce the pressure on diversity will be by design, to what Ida stated, that there are certain prejudices, dogmas attached to profiles of work, that this job can be done by this type of person only, are largely getting reduced. So that pressure or that stress on trying to focus on diversity will not naturally normalize in my mind, because your workforce pattern will have a larger universe to select from. I take examples of Salesforce. I take examples of field workers in the area of distribution, collection. When you can actually think laterally that such jobs can happen anywhere with an amalgamation of virtual and in-office presence, then I don't think there needs to be a necessity to prescribe who can do it, whether it is a gender type or whether it is a generation type and so. So that in my mind, I think is going to be a big driver to a great extent with a natural organic order, instead of this being a very active agenda which has been on the leadership tables and it gets its own share of criticism and a
Right.
push from the top. So we are always struggling to do this. So that's on diversity. My personal opinion, and we don't have a crystal ball in hand, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the future, is there definitely will be a depletion on inclusion. And that's something which I personally believe we should watch out for in our cultural threats. By design, what happens is when you have a split workforce pattern in which there is a set of employees who may, for a foreseeable future, work out of different places, their homes, and there are a few in the field or in offices, it'll be very difficult to create a very inclusive workforce pattern. And organizations, starting from leadership at top, will have to get comfortable with adopting technology coupled with a mindset to have a pushed inclusion agenda. I take a very small example. I'm sure some of you will experience it or would, have a perspective on it. Many a times, leadership team meetings are pushed to be in person for many organizations.
That's right.
I would look forward to seeing how many CEOs after 6 months would be as comfortable to have an inclusive board meeting, management meeting, in which few people join virtually. Some are sitting at a field force table and the rest are in a boardroom. And that, to my mind, will start the inclusion agenda with the way the tone is set from the top and the way leadership sets that inclusion practice from the word go. So that's my take, and a lot to, I hope, unfold in the months to come.
Great, that's an interesting perspective. Nirbhik, if I can, bring you back to the table. You have an industry, you operate in an industry where customer interaction and employee interaction, drives the magic, right? It's hospitality. So how are you seeing work from home sustainable? And how does it impact your productivity norms for all the people who work across hotels? And Jeet, maybe after Nirbhik, if you can also help us, because you're a customer facing industry as well.
So thanks, Avani. I think there are two aspects to it. One is the hotel operations itself. So a chef has to get, if the restaurant is open in the new greenhouse environment or whatever is the new normal, there will be certain percentage of our colleagues a large percentage of our colleagues who have to get to the workplace. Whether it's a reception check-in, things will change. They will become more enabled, technology enabled, there will be innovations. Definitely for the short term, there will be a lot of social distancing and the smile, etc., that we are used to, may be covered with a mask. So I think the industry is grappling with some of these questions, and we are coming up with answers. I think, but there's a different population, particularly if I refer to them as the functions, marketing, HR, IT, which can kind of log in from anywhere and help people or even enable people. I certainly see that this has disrupted the industry from at least getting that functional population to start thinking actively and proactively about working remotely or working from home, which was not happening so far. So even if I speak to my colleagues in Taj, ITC, any of the chains, some of the international chains were doing this better because they're used to doing that perhaps in globally. But certainly the big Indian companies are now coming to the table on that. So I think that population can certainly move in that direction and will. And I think it's a welcome disruption, if I might add, because otherwise flexibility or working remotely was taboo, so to speak. But the population that goes to work to curate a fine dining experience, to take the best check-in in the world, which is warm and friendly, or check out a guest, or even if they have to clean rooms, which is so essential now with all the hygiene and safety that we are all looking for, whether in their PPE suits or etc. I think they will have to get to work, and work from home may not be an option for some of these trades.
Yeah, Jeet, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I echo Nirbhik. Ours is a very intensive relational sales process, but thankfully our customer onboarding and servicing processes were all digitized. So we could seamlessly move to a work from home mode because all our salespeople have tablets, and we had to quickly arrange for ensuring that all corporate teams and others had got access to laptops. So within a week or so, as the lockdown began, and we were an essential service, so we were able to make sure that we could move 100% to work from home. So if you ask me before a month before the anytime before the lockdown, would it be possible to even imagine that we could actually work in a 100% work from a home environment? I wouldn't have believed it. But yes, our salespeople are selling from their houses. We are servicing customers. We have a set of branches. We have almost 400 branches open because we are an essential service, and around 1,500 employees and on any day attending the branches and servicing customers who walk in, because all customers don't have access to or would rather prefer a physical interaction. So that's still going on. But we were able to seamlessly execute work from home, close the results, close the year, finish appraisals, do the increments, all of that. But it's going to be, so if you ask me what's it going to look like, clearly work from home is going to be a new normal. Certainly individual contributors who don't need to perhaps link with other departments, I think we will have a large number of people working from home. And I think one thought that I want to share here is that I think we'll also see a lot of flexibility in employment contracts. Because I think there will be, we're talking of the gig economy, and I think as Nirbhik also mentioned, there is acceleration in adoption of digital. I think employees will also seek a variety of flexibility in employment contracts, where obviously we'll have to differentiate between people who probably choose to work from home 100%, certain kinds of roles like that. Then, we already have underwriters who work from home 100%, and they underwrite cases. So I think this is only going to take off, and they will probably need a different set of benefits. We're thinking through that, but clearly there will be a set of people who will work 100% from home, and there will be a set of people who will have the flexibility to work from home as and when required. Probably roles that require a lot of coordination between departments and where you still want to have face-to-face meetings. So it's an evolving space. I don't know how it's going to look like, but clearly work from home is here to stay, and there will be a significant part of the workforce that will work from home. What that percentage will be is anybody's guess, but I think a large part of it.
Great. So work from home is going to be the new normal. And we heard a lot of different thoughts about how we can engage, how we can use technology to make this work. One thing that's not going to change, crisis or no crisis, is leadership. And given that so many of you have seen not just this crisis, but even 1998 or 2008, I'm going to ask you about what are the leadership lessons that you can share, and if you can highlight 2 traits that are going to be very important for leaders at different levels, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a store manager, whether you're a hotel manager, or a team manager at Microsoft. What is the 2 leadership traits that are going to be part of the new normal? And maybe Vikram, we can start with you.
Vikram, just one thing. We are getting feedback from the audience that the audio is not clear in some cases.
Okay.
So I request if you could be slightly closer to the microphones. Manu, if you can be slightly louder, that would be helpful. Just a quick feedback that we got from the audience. Please carry on.
Thank you. Thank you. So Vikram, maybe we can hear from you as to the 2 traits of leadership that you think are very important, and any lessons from the previous crisis.
Sure. Am I audible? Is it okay for everyone? All
yes,
right.
yeah, it's good. Vikram is good.
No, I think 2 traits. One, I would say, and this is not a very original thought, but I'd like to repeat it. Sometimes history teaches us great lessons, and I'm, was attending a session by Dave Ulrich, and he talked about managing paradoxes. And I think I wanted to bring that out here. We talk about bittersweet, we talk about all these paradoxes, tough love and all that. So I think what I find, and we've spoken about it, but how are we managing paradoxes? That's something very, very important. The paradox of care. I care for you as an employee, but you must show up to work for productivity. Because if there is no business, there's nobody serving customer, I can't pay you the salary. again, the paradox of looking at the future, this current quarter, as well as digitize and disrupt for the next year. So I think, I could go on and on, but the whole notion of being comfortable with paradoxes, and again, ending that on a metaphor, they say that the sign of a great mind is when you can work with two opposing ideas and yet continue to function normally. And we human beings are blessed with this idea of debating on two extremes. So managing paradoxes, I would just say, is one leadership skill. Rather than fighting about it, why is this not going back to normal? It will not. So how do you embrace the new normal and yet pick out on things which may be working from the past? So paradox management, or managing or learning the paradox, is one. And the second thing is, I think I would still say communication. I think, how do you over communicate to the extent of, Manu, you were talking about inclusion. My view is completely the opposite. Leaders who are very good at communicating and drawing out can actually promote inclusion in this manner without the alpha males taking over. I think virtual is a great leveler. The virtual platform, never before in our history have we served that a person who's thumping the table physically will keep the mic. So I feel that the reverse will happen, and leaders who are able to draw out people and ask them to share their views, just like what you're doing. You're not allowing any one person to hog the limelight. What a great leveler! So
Great.
I would say those are the two traits.
What about you, Ira? What are your thoughts?
I don't know how I can beat what Vikram said. I was just listening and taking notes. That was wonderful. Truly, I'm going to back to Microsoft, Vikram. No, I would agree. You said managing paradoxes. To my mind, it's finding the balance, but I meant exactly the same thing. We've got to have leaders who are able to balance between today and tomorrow, between people and business, between complexity and clarity, between what needs to be done and what should be done, right? And so the sentiment is the same, but you said it much better. The other thing to me, which is very important, is you could call it empathy, or you could call it the ability for remember that how they made people feel will outlive what they did. And I think at this point in time, it's really important for leaders to remember that the legacy they leave needs to be also how they made people feel at this point in time. And people need to feel listened to, heard out, secure, safe, cared for. So I think there is something there in the field of empathy and finding balance for leadership.
Manu and Nirbhik, if I can ask both of you to tell us two things to avoid, or probably the pitfalls for leadership, and maybe Manu, you can go first.
Before I contribute to avoid, I do have one which we are, promoting a lot in the media and entertainment space, and I hope it helps a lot of audiences. Smile as if you're in front of the camera. Because it's helping the leaders enormously to exhibit confidence and to exhibit things are in control. This is one time wherein that smile says a lot about the confidence that you can instill in thousands of people who are looking up to you. Well said that the contrarian of what to avoid is actually not to panic. I have really seen examples in the last few months where leaders, the management teams have taken knee-jerk reactions or have been impatient to see how the life unfolds ahead. So the risk in that is definitely that you're missing out on seeing the full picture, and the reactions could actually be a lot more far-reaching to the operating model and business sustenance. So the thing for me to avoid for any leader would be impatience.
Okay, great. Nirbhik?
I just substantiate that. I think keep the times are uncertain. We all know that. So while we are agile, and that's perhaps a do, adding to the finding the balance, but I think that balance has to be found quickly and yet be balanced. So we address the short term, but I think we have to keep an eye on the long term. And I think I'm substantiating what Manu was saying as well. But certainly, I think one of the don'ts is, there's enough media coverage. We are all well versed with what's going on. And I still find that the leaders find it incumbent upon themselves to state the obvious and perhaps give more bad news as to what's happening around the world while they're reflecting or dealing with their own fears. And I think a leader needs to rise above that and show a lot of positivity, optimism. And like Manu said, that smile has to be, that persona has to be, that role modeling has to come upfront in this difficult time for the leader to lead well from the front.
Great. Jeet, I'm going to ask you a different question. When we're talking about technology, a lot of professionals, of very different age groups are going to be faced with the question of how do I refresh myself, right? We're constantly refreshing screens. So when do you hit the refresh button in your view? And how should people who are going to lose jobs or are in between jobs, how do you see investing in yourself as a theme during this crisis?
Yeah, it's a challenging situation because if you can't adapt and learn, clearly you'll not have a job for yourself. So I guess the important thing is that my personal belief is that everybody can learn, and digital learning has made learning accessible to everybody. So organizations are spending a lot of time and effort, and as an engagement tool, and also to help people learn how to cope. For example, a lot of courses on webinars like these, work from home, modules on how to work from home more productively, and adopting technology. I think all that is happening, and I would definitely see a lot more traction gaining where people have access to tools and resources which is virtually available at a cost which is probably a fraction of what it could have been, say, 10 years back or 20 years back, which limited people's ability to retool themselves, that being available now. So I'm very optimistic that whether it's younger people or older people, we shall be able to certainly, if you have the mindset. I think the biggest impediment to change is mindset. So if you're flexible and we're adaptable, I think we should be able to all transition. And I certainly believe in the resilience of the human species to be able to adapt and change. And I think most of us will be able to do that. And so long we are willing to be flexible about our mindset and have the humility to accept we don't have all the answers. So I have just one point to make. It's a very challenging and difficult situation. I don't think anybody has all the answers to what it's going to look like. So anybody who's saying they know exactly what's going to be 6 months from now or 1 year from now. So I think we have to balance this bit of between confidence and getting our teams on board. I think there is a lot more value in what Vikram said is paradox, co-holding multiple perspectives, getting inputs from a diverse set of team members than pretending to know that you have the answer. Because honestly, I don't think anybody has the answer to what's it going to look like 6 months from now or even 2 years from now.
Great. Ira, I have one question for you. Microsoft Teams is something which was, of course, it's your product. And even today, students from class 5 up to people who are 50 are using it. So do you really see that this technology, and what is its role in the new normal, whatever it may look like post-COVID? What do you see the role of technology beyond technology companies?
What we are seeing is the technology is becoming, we use the word ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Yeah. And today, I think economies and industries and, entire governments are being able to function effectively and meet the needs of their citizens and their stakeholders because of technology. So I think we are blessed because can you imagine if COVID had happened 20 years ago or 10 years ago? And I think we are blessed that we have the ability right now to have technology to fall back on so that our world keeps functioning in an efficient fashion. I'm hoping and I'm optimistic about the fact that technology is being used for all the right purposes as the world goes and finds its new normal. But one interesting thing, for example, is on Microsoft Teams, you now can see 9 people on video. Earlier, you could see 4. We very quickly moved to 9. Hey, the more community that you can build, the more important it is. So technology needs to interface as much as possible with the human need for network and the human need for community. And that is something also that I'm hoping we'll get better at. The other place I think we are very fortunate is that the large technology companies in the world, Microsoft is really sort of very focused on that, is the use of technology with integrity, with honesty, compliance, privacy, all of that, because I think that is really important, especially as technology enables so many people to work from home. You don't have those firewalls and those security protocols at a home network as you would, for example, in an office. And so the ability to make technology continue to be used in a safe, secure, private fashion for personal and official needs, I think that's the other big.
Great. Thank you so much, Ira. And, as we're wrapping up this section, I must say it's been an amazing learning for me. While I'm the moderator, I think the rich experience and the perspectives you've shared are great. I'm going to just ask Manu to come in, given she's from entertainment and, it's a gig economy and that's going to be the future. How do you see that impact in the entertainment sector, particularly, Manu? Is that an optimistic view, or is it something that's concerning people in that industry? How do you see that?
So if I take a sectoral view on media and entertainment, we have operated in a gig format since inception. 90% of our workforce globally, locally operates in a gig format. So there, the acceptance of gig format of working has always been there. It's the way the practice runs. As we look forward, though, while the gig format will continue in all its shapes and forms, because that's the only way the industry knows how to operate. You get a pod together, you produce content, you showcase it, and you move on to the next. And that also keeps the creativity on. I think more and more governance around management of gig workforce is going to get built in, which I also hope will be for the betterment of the individual involved in it. And it will give a far greater sense of security and comfort and motivation, the conversation you started with, for somebody to actually operate as a gig worker. The same applies to gig format workforce in rather the other industries where I think the new normal should have a large part of your workforce actually operating in a gig format. The biggest operating efficiency which the corporation can get is to actually adopt this new normal. So for our industry, I think it will continue to be the way it is. And our continuous effort is to guardrail the motivation through ensuring that not only the livelihoods, but also the comfort of somebody working in a format like this is sustainable and continues to grow for us.
Hey, thank you so much. And it's been an amazing dialogue. I'm just going to kind of sum it up. I think HR leadership is going to be important during this crisis. Agility, managing paradoxes, and learning to live with technology, both at home and at work, are going to be important. Let's admit nobody knows what the new normal is, but as leaders, I think the traits required are really be agile, don't be impatient, and be very empathetic as you look towards the future. Let's try and leave the negativity outside and try and build the more smiling faces within our companies as well as within the world. So on that note, I'm going to request Agam and Supreet to help us with the next section.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Avani. And, before Supreet kind of jumps in, I just wanted to tell you that there are, over 1,000 odd people registered, and we've got over 100 questions. So it's not possible to take all of them, but we have pushed the best 8 or 10, whatever we thought would be very relevant to you on your phone. And
Sure.
While we begin the next segment, if I think you can just take a look at it, some are individual specific, some are in general. But,
Okay.
if you can just filter that down and, kind of pick your order while I think Supreet and I jump into the next segment.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to do that. And thank you, my panelists. I'm going to lean on to you as we also have some audience questions. So I guess, Supreet, over to you while I look at some of the interesting questions that come our way.
Thank you, Avani. Thank you so much for leading this.
So that that was a very, very interesting segment, and we'll have a quick 5 to 7 minutes stress buster before we come back to the serious business, that is answering the audience Q&A. So please hang in there. This one is going to be a very quick and interesting rapid fire round. And because we've been told to be vocal for local and promote Indian brands, this round, I'll call it Sula with Supreet. And I'm going to ask Sula for sponsoring this section next time onwards. So this round is a mix of business and some questions to loosen you up so that the audience gets to see a different side of you all as well. And here's my first target for today. Ira, you are my target, the first one. And if you're all set, I'll shoot. Okay.
Go ahead.
What is one advice that you'll give to your employees to thrive in today's environment?
Please focus on finding the balance.
Okay. If you knew that lockdown, about the lockdown 6 months prior, what would you have done differently at work and at home?
At home, I would have eaten out a lot more.
Okay.
At work, I think I would have hugged my colleagues a lot more.
The first destination that you would want to holiday at once the lockdown is lifted?
Well, I was supposed to take my daughter to see colleges. She's supposed to apply to colleges this year, so I was going to take her abroad to see colleges. So that would definitely be first.
Okay, and which country would that be?
That was the US.
Okay, interesting. So once this crisis is over, which part of the HR function that you think will change and will be changed for good?
I think we'll all be changed for good. I think the role of HR all across is going to have to change in order to embrace a new norm and a new set of employee realities.
Okay. One word that describes you outside office.
Still under construction.
If you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would it be and why?
No one. I would not trade my life. I'm very grateful for my life. Very grateful. All the what's and all, I'm very grateful.
My last question to you. If you were not an HR and business leader, what would you want to be?
A teacher.
Oh.
I'd be awful, but that's what I would want to be.
Wow, that's very interesting. Fantastic. That was really, really great. I think you are in the running for the native EA gift hamper.
We haven't heard from the others. They're far better, I assure you.
Sure, let's see. Vikram, you are up next. You're ready?
Okay.
Okay, here you go. When do you see the hiring momentum return? 6 months, 1 year, 2 year?
Honestly, it won't. Different skills will be needed, but the same set of skills may not be needed. So digital, for example, sales is changing, which is a large hiring volume. So different kind of people. So not the same skills won't return, newer skills.
What household chore that you got really bad, that you were really bad at?
No, I missed you there. You said a household chore?
That you are really bad at.
Oh, I'm really bad at cooking. I'm good at chopping vegetables, especially for Chinese. I'm a precision chopper.
Okay.
Not good at cooking.
Whiskey, vodka, wine, or beer? The drink that you have consumed the most in the lockdown?
Whiskey.
Okay. If you are stranded on a deserted island alone, what are the 3 things that you will keep with you?
A book, if I can carry along with me a yoga teacher and a monk or a guru.
Oh, wow. Interesting. 2 leadership traits that you look for when you hire leaders for your organizations.
Courage, somebody who can challenge me even during an interview. Certainly courage. And the second is vision. Ability to set a vision and show a great picture of vision.
One word that describes you as a person.
Fun-loving.
Okay. And if you had a chance to have dinner with one public figure, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
It would be, I think, Martin Luther King. I would ask him, hey, there was no Zoom when you were alive. There were no emails. How did you influence without, and you carried the masses along? How did you do that?
Okay. That's way back in time. Brilliant. Well, you guys are really good at this. And thanks for being a sport, Vikram. Really well done. Moving on. Nirbhik, you are next. If you're ready, I'll start shooting.
Sure, please go ahead.
Sure. One book that you would recommend everybody to read?
It's one of the first books I read ever, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I read it every year. And if you can't read the whole book, read the first 20 pages, it's good enough.
Okay. One household chore that you have mastered during the lockdown?
Watering the plants.
Okay.
If that's yeah.
What will be your advice to a 24-year-old self?
24-year-old?
If you were to advise yourself of 24-year-old, what would be your advice?
Stay focused.
Okay. Compensation structures will become more variable in future. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Okay. Once the lockdown is over, what is the first thing that you will do other than going back to office?
Round of golf for sure.
Okay. One web series or movie that you have recently watched and that you will highly recommend?
Billions.
Oh, that's my favorite movie.
There you go.
Yeah. One thing that you missed the most during the lockdown?
I think I missed the colleagues. I missed my friends. Definitely, the social aspect. You say man is a social animal. But in another way, whoever I call now cannot say I'm busy and I cannot take your call. So I found that this is the time to really connect with people. So while you cannot connect physically, I think it's been a great time for reviving old friendships and connections.
If you were to live the life of one character from a movie or a TV series, who will it be and why?
I think Jack Bauer from 24, just for the pace and the action in the guy's life, not to do with the aggression or the violence or the terrorism, etc., but just the pace, the focus, and the determination. I really like Jack for all of that.
Wow, very interesting. Nirbhik, that was really interesting and crisp, and I think you've given Ira and Vikram a run for their hamper. It was a lot of fun, guys. Good to see you in a very different avatar. Agam, over to you to put rest of the panelists on the hot seat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supreet. And while you've got your segment sponsored from Sula, I didn't get the time to do that. So, and my questions may be a little more dangerous. So I'm calling it Danger with Dang. And on the Danger with Dang hot seat, first up I have Manu. Manu, are we ready?
Yes, all set.
Great. So what would be the one advice that you will give to your 24-year-old self, Manu, who's starting out her career?
Take risks. Fail.
Take risks. Fail. Great. The worst is ahead of us or behind us?
We're in midst the worst right now.
Midst of the worst. Great. And when do you see the normalcy return, Manu? 3 months, 6 months, 12, 2 years, never? What's your pick?
If I define normalcy, it'll never return in the old form. But the new normalcy is already on its way, and I think it should be in a good shape in 12 months.
Wonderful. If you were not a business or an HR leader, Manu, what would have been?
Artist.
Wow. Great. The first destination that you would want to holiday at once the lockdown is lifted?
We're already seeing pictures of a lot of beach destinations, and we're dying to go.
Do we all not want some sun back in our lives? That's great.
Absolutely.
And if you could trade your lives with anyone for a day, who would it be and why?
No one. I'd like my life the way it is.
Great. Last one. 2 most important traits that you look for when you hire in your team or for your organization.
Humility and resilience.
Wonderful. And I think these are the traits which will be needed more in the future. Good, Manu. Thanks so much. Thanks a lot. Jeet, you are next. Are we ready?
Yeah, hi, Agam. Yeah, sure. Hot seat.
Great. Great. So, what do you think, Jeet? Percentage of employees who will move to work from home permanently? 10%, 20, 30, 50,
I think higher.
more?
I think higher, 50. It'll happen.
Even in your industry?
Yes. I mean, salespeople don't need to come to office. Anyway, meet customers. So, large numbers.
That's correct. Do you think compensation structures will become more performance driven in the future?
Of course.
Great. Which part of the HR function do you think will change the most once the crisis is over?
No, L&D clearly, because technology is democratizing learning, and you won't see so many trainers as professionals. It'll be more these kind of, I mean, they'll have to adapt and deliver training through technology.
Correct. And one book that you would recommend everyone to read? I know you are a voracious reader, so I, love to hear that.
So it's a context, I mean, it marked me because I read it at a point in time when I was quite young. It's called The Road Less Traveled. It tells you to judge everything critically. And I think that's it. Don't believe in everything. I mean, question. It's Scott Peck, Road Less Traveled.
Road Less Traveled. Wonderful. Great. One word that describes you best as a person, Jeet.
I like to think of myself as easygoing, but the others can judge me.
And which household chore have you mastered during the lockdown?
I'd be lying if I said I did. I've been very lucky.
You're getting it easy. I must say that. All right. Whiskey, vodka, rum or beer, your choice of poison during lockdown.
So, I've enjoyed my whiskey and wine over the lockdown, and gin a bit of gin and tonic as well.
Gin and tonic as well. Great. Thank you so much, Jeet. Wonderful answers. Very, very reflective of who you are. Now, Avani, we have you left, and I think you've been doing all the questioning so far. We thought we'll put you on the hot seat as well, and let's see what you've got to say. So are you ready, Avani? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me clearly?
Now I can. Are you ready?
Yes.
Great. So, Avani, what is one advice that you will give to your employees to thrive in today's environment?
Be optimistic and be very agile.
Optimistic and agile. Wonderful. What do you think, Avani? The worst is ahead of us or behind us?
Ahead of us.
Ahead of us. Great. Two important traits that you look for when you hire in your team, Avani.
Courage and passion.
Courage and passion. What's the last book that you've read?
It's a book called Bold. It's about how future technologies are shaping the world and human race, basically.
And you recommend that?
Absolutely.
Great. One word that describes you outside of office, Avani.
Courageous.
Courageous. If you were not a business leader, what would you be?
Maybe a political leader.
Wow, wonderful. We have a politician amongst ourselves today. Okay, Avani, the first destination that you would want to holiday at once the lockdown is lifted?
Switzerland.
Switzerland. Great. And the last one, if you could trade lives with anyone for a day, who would it be and why?
Einstein. Would love to see how he solved the problem of COVID.
Wow, this is such a wonderful answer. And thank you so much to Avani as well as all the panelists for being so themselves and being so articulate in their answers, as well as, being so spontaneous. So thanks a lot for that. And Avani, I think we've got a lot of questions which we've got, and I think you've been, passed on them. So I'll request you to come back and, take over the Q&A segment for us. Thank you.
Agam, can you just tell me, am I clearly audible? Is there any echo so that I can...
Very audible.
No, you're fine.
Great. So Jeet, Manu and Nirbhik, Vikram, there are interesting questions. If I can just give you a quick, summary as to where they're coming from. I think a lot of people are thinking about what HR organization structure will look like post-COVID. So one of the questions is that since a lot of functions are going to get, changed, is there going to be a shrinkage in the HR organization itself? And maybe Vikram, you can start with it because you're seeing different industries in your conglomerate. There seems to be anxiety as to my role will become redundant very soon. So any thoughts on that?
I think all parts of HR will change, but clearly I see an opportunity, and I also see, for example, shared services kind of roles in HR. I think HR shared services organizations will grow in their appeal. They will move beyond transactions because cost and cash conservation, cash is king, and companies are going to do cost saving measures. Let's just understand that's the truth. And therefore, a lot more transactions and the shared services centers will start moving and eating into HRBP and centers of excellence jobs. That's my thought. And at the same time, the emergence, the strength, of HR analytics. Wow, finally, it's their time to just take up that space. So HR analytics, that's going to take up, start driving a lot of HR decisions. So I see those, that those two changes.
Great. Nirbhik, if I can draw you in, a specific question is that what are some of your suggestions to handle people who are going to get burnt out? Because, there's a lot of work from home and that creates its own environment. And how do you help employees balance what is personal and what is work while they are at home?
I think this is a brilliant question because uh, we are under pressure to ensure that people deliver more because our paradigm kind of suggests to us that when you start working from home, you cut corners or you're lying on a bed and taking it. I'm just kind of painting the picture or just take it easy. But that's not necessarily true. Let me paint the reverse scenario. In a city like Mumbai, where you were commuting for 3.5 hours, you are now actively available for these 3.5 hours to take all calls and any work-related matter. So there's no switch off time. Uh, Weekends, I find people are now working as if there are no weekends. And if you call up somebody, he says that I just work. And even the length of time has really increased. So substantiating what you're saying, I think Infosys has done this very well. And I was on another panel listening to the HR head of Infosys. And he said that they are revising productive norms to ensure that the login and logout timings are being monitored now, not how actually longer they were working, if you see the difference. And I think that's a very proactive measure to really see that colleagues. And I think it's also incumbent upon all the leaders that while they're communicating their anxiety, that productivity is not be able to recognize where colleagues are putting in too much or too many hours. And I think it's a function of the anxiety levels where people worry for their have to be second to none, and I need to be complete star more than I ever have because I could be on the chopping block tomorrow. And I think it comes back to communication, and I think a very supportive environment, even where employees can actually talk and share their heart, fear of any reprisal or anything coming back to them. So I think a number of techniques, but I think thanks to who asked live. And while we worry about loss of productivity, we need to really worry about.
Thank you, Nirbhik. Related question, maybe I'll request people are asking this, that how do you keep the workforce engaged and truly motivated because they're working from, and what are some of the things that you as HR leader help motivate people? Yeah, Manu, could you get that?
Yes, there was an echo. To your question on engaging workforce in a virtual, to some of the conversations we have had in the last 1.5 hours, an example. While there is a lot of engagement practices virtually, as a leadership team, one needs to be out there in front to create engagement with purpose. And that blend, in my mind, is the fine balance which leaders need to flex their muscles a lot on, if not by now. When I say engagement with purpose, it has to be driven with empathy. and also making sure that individuals are included in any effort which the organization is driving towards sustainability. That's the best way you can engage with inclusion and with leadership at the top driving it. The second format of engagement, which I'm seeing very effectively in our organization, if working, and I'm sure a lot of you are practicing, is leadership regularly communicating to the last mile. It may not necessarily be the town hall or roundtable formats, but it is also one-on-one reach outs of how life has been. Understanding and being considerate that a 9 a.m. work meeting, which I think Nirbhik stated, may necessarily not be congenial because it may coincide with a personal chore. Ensuring that there is a respect for a 2 to 3 p.m. because life may not be the same, because at work you could be free, but at home you might actually be cleaning the dishes. And it's a reality. That engagement of being empathetic towards the life of the last mile worker, in my mind, is the best practice which organizations can take today. And this puts a pressure on leadership, but this is why leaders are, and what our responsibility at this point of time is.
Great. Thank you, Manu. Maybe I'll request Vikram to come in. One question that a lot of the people on the, who are attending this webinar is that, downsizing is the big elephant in the room, right? People are concerned. That's a fact. We've spoken about it in the last hour that we've engaged. The question here is, are there any alternatives? Do you really need to let people go? Are there other costs that you could look at to really drive your bottom line during the times when their revenue is slim?
Actually, there are indeed multiple options. Certainly, we are, and I don't speak about our position as a group, so we are not at the moment doing any downsizing. But whether it's sabbaticals, furloughs, I think globally those are some things being used. So I think when you don't, or for the periods of time when you don't need people, if you can transparently state, so there are now companies which are doing either sabbaticals, or if you work 25% of the time with 25% pay, if you have some visibility on jobs where there is a possible reduction. So those are the kind of opportunities which can also be explored between sabbaticals, furloughs, and part-time work. I think those are the options.
I think one other question that is, interesting is, what are the two biggest worries at work? Maybe Ajit, would you like to come in at this point?
Yeah. No, I think the whole issue of is my job safe is certainly, I'm sure, uppermost on many people's minds. So I think organizations need to make sure they reassure employees that two things. One is, of course, there is a demand for productivity, but somewhere employees have to feel reassured that they're not on the chopping block, because that will have a completely demoralizing effect on morale and productivity. So I don't think, so the whole process, I mean, going back to the earlier question also, if I want to just allude, there are many ways to, manage this. So one option is, of course, starting with leadership, and then move on to, part-time kind of options, or options where you look at people taking sabbaticals, maybe 1 day a week. I mean, there are a lot of organizations doing that. Pay cuts. Anyway, for most organizations, almost 20% of the overall pay would be in variable form. So if the organization is not performing, that's the pay at risk, which helps organizations tide over a crisis in any context. Now, if it's more than that, I mean, if for revenues fall by 40%, at some point in time, there will be a pressure on employee cost management. And I think there is an opportunity to start with cutting at the top and taking it down. But so my limited point is, people at the front line, they have to feel protected, because they are the ones who are touching customers. And if they are the ones who are having anxiety and morale issues, then you can imagine what customer service is going to be like. So I think any organization that creates anxiety for their front line would be making a huge mistake in doing that. The second part of it is, how am I going to be relevant for the future, which is really upskilling and learning. And it's a Google world. There's enough amount of learning opportunities. I think I mentioned about in my the earlier question that you asked, it's about your mindset. I mean, if you are not learning, you become a dinosaur. So while organizations will give you the platform and the opportunities, but the onus on learning and adapting has to be with the employee. I think that's very clear.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think it's been really awesome. You all have been very authentic, spoken your mind, and really given people attending this a lot to think about. So thanks once again. It's been amazing for me. Agam and Supreet, over to you guys.
Well, thanks, Avani. That was a really, really interesting and insightful session, giving us a lot of clarity and direction on how organizations and the HR function at large is looking at the crisis, is navigating the crisis, and how are they looking to build into the future. We today were joined by almost 1100 plus viewers, various HR leaders and business leaders. There were 150 plus questions. We were short on time. We could only take up a few of them. Thank you so much, Vikram, Nirbhik, Manu, Judhajit, and Ira. Ira had to unfortunately log off due to an urgency slightly early. Thank you all for sharing your perspective with us today. And Avani, many thanks for being a wonderful moderator. Thanks, my co-host, Agam, and a big thank you to all our attendees. We appreciate the time that you've taken out to be here today with us and hope you enjoyed the session as much as we enjoyed hosting it. We look forward to hosting more such webinars. In fact, please do write to us if there is any particular topic that you would like us to host. Stay tuned, stay safe. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, everybody. Lovely meeting all of you.
Lovely seeing all of you.
Bye-bye.
And I hope the hamper's on the way.
The hamper is definitely on the way, Nirbhik.
I wanted
For
to
sure.
Preet and Agam on that.
You can hold us on that. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.